photograph right here is from the 27th of October 1961, and I'll move a bit if you cannot see it. It's basically a whole bunch of tanks. We have here the US Army checkpoint, the replica we're going to see in a moment. That is checkpoint Charlie, and then on this side was the Soviet Union checkpoint, where you guys are standing. Right, this was the Soviet Union checkpoint, and just 2 months after the Berlin Wall is built, there's a standoff, and this photograph shows you why Checkpoint Charlie is so famous, why we're here, and what it represented. Represented US versus the Soviet Union in the Cold War in a very real way. That's why it's so famous. Also looks fantastic on a photo, right? Obviously. So that is kind of why it's here. It's why it's in a lot of movies, because it just makes a great image. Now we get to East and West Berlin and that photograph, and why did that happen? Okay, so you all ready?
Yeah.
To fall asleep? No, just kidding. Okay, so let's keep it short and simple. World War II ends, right? The Nazis lose, and then occupying powers come in. The major powers that defeat the Nazis are the Soviet Union, the United States, the United Kingdom. They also add French onto that for political reasons, and then they meet just outside of Berlin. If my face is Berlin, there's a town over here, just outside, somewhere here, called Potsdam. And Potsdam is the former royal family's retreat. So they had 6 palaces there, and because it's just like a posh area, it wasn't destroyed in the war, and they had held a couple of meetings there. The most famous is called the Potsdam Conference. It was in July and August 45, and that laid down the division of Germany and the division of Berlin. Now, because we live in 2017 and Samsung obviously kicks the iPhone's ass, no, just random comment, I'm going to go into my gallery here, and I'm going to pull out a photo. I'm going to show you the division of the city and division of the country, because I want to make sure that it's very clear what I'm talking about. So, starting off here, this is the way they decided to divide Germany up, okay? So it's divided up basically into 4 sectors, roughly upon geographic lines. So the French get the bit closest to France, the United Kingdom get the bit closest to the UK, the Soviet Union get the bit closest to the Soviet Union, and the Americans obviously get the bit closest to the best alcohol, right, which is Bavaria, right down here in the south, okay? Now one little detail, Berlin sits in the middle of the red sector, okay? Now if you forget everything else I say, just remember that. Berlin, middle of the red, the Soviet sector. But it is not given to them as their own entire city. Now, context I was talking about the whole time of the tour so far, I hope sheds light on that. Think about it like this. This is the capital. This is also the richest city, so their whole family is from. This also represents a couple of other details. Politically and also philosophically, a very important place in Europe. This is where Karl Marx studied, the father of communism, right? So for the communists, like, we want part of the city, but at the same time, this also represented all of the continent. This was a more powerful and richer city than Paris in that era. So for the Americans, they're like, we want a piece of the city as well. We don't just give it all to the Soviet Union. So they sat down and they then divide Berlin also up into 4 sectors, right? Which makes absolutely no common sense other than politics. So the way they do it is they take the pre-existing council districts, so the black lines you're going to see here, the little black lines in the middle, they are pre-existing districts. So these are not random lines. The Americans and the British and the Soviets are like, we're just going to draw these lines. They took districts. So that means there are some districts that are entirely former West and some that are entirely former East. For example, the district down here is called Kreuzberg. It's where I live. It's a really hip, cool district, obviously, right? And that was the American sector. The district we've been in so far over there is called Mitte, which means the middle. Right? And that is just old historical, that's the city center. The Soviets got that because they got the first choice. They're the ones that defeated the Nazis in Berlin. So they're like, we want this. The Americans are like, we want this because there's a big airport. We want the airport. That was the deal, right? But in general, what that means is then you have that red sector on one side and then 3 other sectors surrounded by that red sector, okay? Now in the beginning, they're like, it's all gonna be fine, right? Like, you know, we're all buddies, right? We love each other. We're all besties. BFFs for life, right? Whatever. And then in 1947, the Soviet Union gets a bit frustrated because of this, because of money. They realize all the factories, all the good money's in the West. And so they say, hey, we're going to sort of demand that we get more money from you guys. And the Americans are like, hey, you signed a contract in 45. Sorry, brother, we can't change it now. And so the Soviet Union is, well, hell, what, we're going to sort of make your lives more difficult by erecting checkpoints around Berlin. Because at that point, you could drive a truck, take a train from West Berlin to West Germany, no worries. But then in 1948, the Americans go, well, hell with this, we're going to start our own currency. We're going to call it the Deutschmark, right? We're going to implement it just in the 3 Western sectors and exclude the Soviet sector. And the Soviet Union reacts by saying, okay, we're going to block all of the trains and all of the highway routes in and out of West Berlin to West Germany, thereby shutting down this city. 2 million people lived in West Berlin and surrounding it like in medieval times. So we're going to starve you guys out and we're going to take the whole thing. Now, Americans reply, they go, well, guess what? We still got up there. So they fly everything in. And thank God, in 1945, they'd written into contract permanent air routes in and out of the city, but not permanent train or truck routes. So they fly everything in. We call this the Berlin Airlift. It lasts for about a year. And that is what leads to the official political split. And that is the first time the United States and the Soviet Union have a proper physical confrontation. Korean War happens a year later. This is the first proper one, but no one is killed on either side. It's like a huge, super tense standoff. Right? And when I say they're not killed, they're not shot down. Some pilots died because at the peak of the airlift, a plane landed in West Berlin on average every 90 seconds, 24 hours a day. Most flying during daylight hours, so you figure that out. No GPS, and all of a sudden, people are going to hit each other with that volume of planes. So there were crashes, about 50 people died due to crashes, but no one was shot down. Now, what do you think was the major thing they would have supplied the city with? What do you reckon? Number one?
Flour. Food.
Food, yeah, good answer, a bit wrong. Alcohol. Alcohol, good answer, but alcohol's easy to make. Potatoes,
ammunition.
Done.
Ammunition.
Ammunition, no, we weren't fighting any wars. Well, you guys are freezing today, right?
Oh,
Imagine what it's like here in February. Clothes, coal, oil, heating equipment. 80% of the city's destroyed. Power plants are shut down. People need to cook fast. Right? So we fly that in. Food, though, once more detail. We do love one sauce in Germany. It is not ketchup, it is mustard, right, on all the meat. I love ketchup, sweet or sour, doesn't matter, we love it. We ran out of mustard. Sacrilege, right? And so some German woman in West Berlin, she got ketchup from the US military provisions. Like, sweet, we got a hell of a lot of ketchup, shirtload of it. And the British are like, we got curry powder, you know, thank you Team India, you know, as well, bringing it in. Not very spicy curry, right? And then she's like, we're going to get a sausage, pork sausage, put ketchup, shitload of ketchup, and we're going to put curry. And voila, the currywurst was born. So it was born due to a lack of mustard. If you do want to try it on the break, I always recommend you have it with a beer, because it doesn't really taste that great, okay? So you need something to wash down the taste and enjoy it. Yeah, it's good after a beer, right? Yeah. There's the Currywurst Museum stand, it's just there, and there's another one down there in case you do want to do it. And make sure you always get it with the skin on. There's the one without the skin is like, it's like a naked sausage, it's weird, yeah? So make sure you get it with the skin. They do have, I think, a vegetarian option in most places in case you don't eat meat as well. But all of the meat, just to be clear, in Germany is always pork. Right? There's no beef or any stuff. So don't eat pork and forget about it. All right, moving on from there. 49, that's the split. First wall goes up in 53. That is between East and West Germany, and then cutting through to the chase. The Berlin Wall is then built on the 13th of August. That is a Sunday. Overnight in the first version, a barbed wire fence, about yay high. It's like half a meter, a bit more. So why did I pull up? I meant like this. That's what I meant to show you. Like that high, all the way around the city. Now the border, all the way around West Berlin, was about 100 miles or 160 kilometers. 20,000 soldiers were woken up to roll it out. So that means by 10 a.m. on Sunday morning, you could no longer cross from this street to that street. Before then, you could just cross. You go down the next street, cross over, go back, whatever. No big deal. It wasn't really like looked upon with a lot of smiles, but you could do it. And now you were funneled through checkpoints like Checkpoint Charlie. There were 14 others, but the reason why this one is also so famous, not just the photo, it's also because of its importance for the US and British military. So you had Checkpoint Alpha, between West Germany to East Germany, Checkpoint Bravo, between East Germany to West Berlin, and Checkpoint Charlie, or C, between West Berlin to East Berlin. Germans, for example, did not use this checkpoint, or very, very rarely. Most of the time they would drive through using a checkpoint down that way called Checkpoint D, or Delta, or West Berliners could take the subway all the way up to a station. I met some of you guys at Friedrichstrasse. They get out there, go through an airport-like security, visit their relatives over in the east. Easterners could not do the same. It was a privilege just for the Westerners. Now, I'm pretty much wrapped up almost everything here, but I want to add one little bit of context. When you think about a wall going up overnight, what kind of consequences do you think that would have? Think about it in very boring, practical terms. Work. What else?
There's people visiting relatives.
Relatives. Yep.
At work or like sort of completely away from their phones.
Totally. So you bad timing, right?
That's something.
Or what about think about modern context? You know, you're on Tinder, right?
Banks.
It's Saturday night, the day before. You're bored at home. You've had a bottle of wine with a mate, you know, and as a heterosexual man, you know, swiping right till kingdom come, right? Because we don't get any likes. Doesn't matter how you look, right? That's just the reality for men. Swiping like that, and then you know you get a match. You go out, you have a good time, you know. Sleeping in a place you don't know, or you're out till it's pretty late. You go, oh, I'm gonna go home now, whatever. You know, I'm gonna get a coffee on the way. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning. You can't go home. Talk about walk of shame, right? Talk about walk of awkwardness, like, right? What about other things like you guys mentioned? Visit your relative, have dinner. Oh, I've had a bit of wine. A bit time, I'm gonna fall asleep here, and you can't go home. Famous story: grandma takes a granddaughter over for a weekend visit. Can't return the granddaughter to the mum. Stuff like that happens, right? When you have a city of nearly 4 million people, that stuff is just going to happen. Because people didn't decide to live in this sector or that sector because it was American or Soviet. They just lived there, okay? If you want to go up to Checkpoint Charlie, what you are seeing, this is all a reconstruction. This is not real in that sense, because 1990 comes around, wall's gone. What do you think we do to stuff like this? We get rid of it. Why? We don't need it. So it's taken off. And then in the late 90s, they rebuilt it because a lot of people came. Imagine it. You know, all the tourists that retired and they've seen it in all the movies. I've come to Berlin to see Checkpoint Charlie. Where's Checkpoint Charlie? And then we rebuild it for that reason. So it is not a real thing in that sense. It is just a show. Okay, just to be very clear. And the guys standing on the front, they are actors. Okay, they are not real soldiers. The guy here, he's also an actor. He's posing as the last American soldier to serve here in 1990. Last name is Harper. On the backside is his Soviet equivalent. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
There's a board that states.
Yeah, you are now entering.
Is that also?
That is also a replica of the original.
Okay.
So you are now entering or leaving the American sector depending on the side you're on.
Okay.